looking for escapism, I just want to escape.
Welcome back to my disembodied voice. Psychopathy. There have been many definitions since the dawn of psychological studies, as well as discussions over the many different types. But today, as we are looking at one character from one film, we need a singular, concise approach to start from. So, in terms of defining psychopathy, let's go with the definition from the National Library of Medicine, which states, psychopathy is a neuropsychiatric disorder marked by deficient emotional responses, lack of empathy, and poor behavioural controls, commonly resulting in persistent antisocial deviance and criminal behaviour. Accumulating research suggests that psychopathy follows a developmental trajectory with strong genetic influences and which precipitates deleterious effects on widespread functional networks, particularly within paralimbic regions of the brain. So, psychopathy is a disorder characterized in part by shallow emotional responses, lack of empathy, impulsivity, and an increased likelihood for antisocial behavior. Now, as discussed above, there are also many subtypes, and people will always talk about the narcissistic psychopath, the antisocial psychopath, the borderline psychopath, the sadistic psychopath, but technically we can narrow that down even more by finding just two types of psychopath in which to discuss in today's case study. So, in 1941, Karpman, and that's Karpman, not Cartman, suggested that primary psychopathy was the consequence of an intrinsic idiopathic deficit, which we may now consider to be genetic influences, and secondary psychopathy was the result of indirect factors, e.g. trauma exposure, with the behavioural consequences of each appearing quite similar with subtle differences. Lycan, in 1995, furthered the secondary psychopathy as sociopathy, stating that parental factors, nurturing, maladaptive personality, development, and trauma all contributed towards making a sociopath. Over the years, and culminating with Scheme in 2007, this distinction has evolved, and rather than adhering to such strict divisions of etiology, it is often suggested that primary psychopaths are characterized by lower anxiety, general poverty of emotional expression, and tend to commit crimes which are fundamentally instrumental in nature. Conversely, secondary psychopaths are more anxious, showing more emotional volatility, and commit more impulsive, reactionary crimes. However, we're going to stay with the primary psychopath today, as we're going to look at a cold-blooded, coin-tossing and relentless killing machine who is up there with one of the best portrayals of a villain ever seen on screen and can stand in the psychologically accurate gallery of villains such as Hannibal Lecter, Heath Ledger's Joker, and Norman Bates. So, let's look at Anton Chigurh from the film No Country for Old Men, who is classified as an idiopathic psychopath. Now, we will look into that definition a little more shortly, but as psychopathy is a mental disorder which also affects the entire construct of a personality, we need to establish the symptomology of a psychopath. So, in a nutshell, our symptom list for a psychopath is boldness, superficial charm, pathological lying, lack of empathy or remorse, inclination to violence, psychological manipulation, impulsivity, narcissism, Machiavellianism. So, as we are discussing the primary psychopath field today, now let's go to the term idiopathic. In terms of the definition for idiopathic, the dictionary defines it as idiopathic, relating to or denoting any disease or condition which arises spontaneously for which the cause is unknown. Now, Karpman cited the idiopathic psychopath as unknown, so the only methodology we have, therefore, as no social factors are known, is genetic and biological. So, in terms of the idiopathic psychopath, what deficits do they possess? Now, there is no psychopath gene which is passed down, but the brain chemistry can be scrutinised. One such area is the almond-shaped amygdala, which lies in your limbic system and is part of the mammalian brain. The limbic system deals with fight or flight, endocrinal system, as well as associative learning. The prefrontal cortex is also compromised in people with psychopathy, as the prefrontal cortex regulates our actions, emotions, and thoughts, and psychopaths have greatly reduced connections between the ventromedial and prefrontal cortex. So our idiopathic psychopath isn't made by trauma or abuse, could fit into daily life and normalise themselves within the populace without standing out, but they have a very different frame of reference as well as an innate and unnatural understanding of connectivity and basic human emotions. This is evident in Anton Chigurh, as throughout No Country with Old Men, we see him interacting with people in the most incongruent and unnerving ways. Now, it's important to remember that just because Chigurh has a differently wired brain, this doesn't make him stupid or an idiot. It's quite the opposite, actually. He is incredibly philosophical and sees through all the horsepoo, nonsense, posturing and selfishness of humanity. However, when he is going through his philosophy, he can then completely change again and go from deep thinking to a very blunt nihilism. It's like when he's offering the gas station attendant a toss of the coin to save his life. He talks about paths of collision, heading towards a choice, the depth of putting your life in a coin toss, and then, when the gas station attendant wins and gets to keep the coin, Anton berates him for putting it in his pocket as it would make this lucky coin just like any other coin. He then says, which it is, as there's no separation between item, luck, fate, yet everything has led to this moment, so it's all fate, luck, determinism. Although, in the end, it is just a coin, as Anton says. Even his own wonderful and poignant philosophy and torturing of the man who he would kill upon the wrong side of a coin landing is all just so matter of fact. There's no sadism in scaring the man, there's only a lack of understanding in regard to the emotivity. There is no grand philosophy other than what things are, but the very existence of such banality is a cause for philosophy itself, even though it's just a coin at the end of the day. The wonderful paradoxes and incongruences of this man says everything about him, and yet his engagement with the deeper emotional sides of his arguments and philosophies are based upon pragmatism and matter of fact. You almost get the impression that Anton wonders about these things, but for all of his rumination, there is a near anhedonic outcome, because for anyone to have a philosophy, they need emotion, emotivity, and a deeper train of connectivity to understand the deeper meaning. It's what the human brain does in terms of discovering, thinking, wondering, and then challenging, whereas Anton's brain doesn't have the requisite humanity to decipher the deeper meanings. It's a similar setup when he kills Woody Harrelson's Carson Wells, who is a bounty hunter. Carson offers Anton the chance to have the money because he knows where it is. Anton, however, remains unmoved, neither excited or angry, tempted or cautious, and simply states, "I will go on better. I know where the money will end up. It will be brought back and placed at my feet." When Carson challenges Anton's certainty, Anton bites back and states he knows of a certainty, which is he's going to kill Carson now, and as idiopathic psychopaths cannot be bribed, bullied, negotiated with, or even placated, the grim acceptance of what's coming sets over Carson. Anton then asks, if the rule you followed brought you to this, of what use was the rule? Focusing on Carson's face, as remember, 70% of communication is non-verbal, we now see someone trying to understand, come to terms with things, and ultimately face the choice. And the choice is accept or try and escape what's coming. The gas station man had a similar conundrum and, at the end of the day, had to play for a coin toss of his life. Yet for Carson, there is no coin toss. He is going to die, it's just whether he accepts it with dignity or embarrasses himself by trying to fight back. Anton is the personification of destiny. It is the demon you were always destined to meet, right from that day you were born, hurtling down the highway of life to this very moment of reckoning. Yet there is no enjoyment, passion, or righteousness in his judgments. It's just accepted. It's an absolute. So we have lack of empathy, no remorse, a propensity for violence, narcissism and Machiavellianism, and this isn't just for those Anton encounters on his travels. Be it the people who hire him and then lose faith in him, the man he is chasing, or even the poor driver on the road when he needs a new car, Anton Chigurh has no demarcation between right and wrong, innocent bystander and someone embroiled in over their heads, or even an indolent employer, they are all just objects. Now, if antisocial personalities have problems reading body language and struggle with semantic aphasia, which is problems naming objects and understanding the nuance of language, then does the idiopathic psychopath have the same? Well, not in Anton's case, as he knows what things are and knows what role they play. He just doesn't care about any of it. Remember, Anton hasn't come from trauma or abuse, he isn't on a revenge mission, and he certainly isn't suffering from a personality warped by poor upbringing. He is the idiopathic psychopath, which means everything is biological, genetic, and thus his interactions with the world are through a frame of reference we cannot fully understand and never will. As an idiopathic psychopath, he is also a primary psychopath. Remember our two groups at the start of primary and secondary? So he is a low anxiety psychopath. It is theorised that the secondary psychopath variety are high anxious psychopaths, and studies have supported this distinction on the basis of reactivity and arousal to stress. And this makes sense, as if you have ever been made cruel by nurture, then your attitude, remember, attitude is the pattern of characteristics across the whole matrix of the persona, and temperament will be open to fluctuation as much as your experiences were when you were growing up. However, if your brain just isn't wired properly, your desires and control are inhibited and you have a lack of understanding over the basic connotative and interpersonal facets which make up human behaviour, then everything is just what it is. It's just there. So, despite the philosophy, it's also just so pragmatic. It's no wonder that Anton is somewhat of a philosopher, as this is his way of interpreting the world, as things like luck, chance, rules and greed are all foreign concepts. Even when he's offered the money, he refuses, as he isn't in this for the money, he's in this to recover the object he has been hired to get. There is grandiosity, but there is no greed. There is violence and death, but all this is necessary as he is getting from point A to point B, and nothing will stop him, even pain. When he is shot and wounded and then mashed in a car crash at the end of the film, it's just something that hurts, and, whilst clearly in distress, the attitude is very much something that needs to be fixed, instead of viewing it as an internal injury, pain, trauma to the body, or anything else. It's something which can be sequenced through, and, aware he can't go to hospital or call an ambulance, he deals with everything with precision and a matter of fact. And this is the same for the emotional cues and interactions, as, with a decreased notion for social cues and norms, his temperament never changes, whether it's about executing someone or getting his hands on the money he has been paid to recover. So the lack of prefrontal grey matter interferes with social programming and behaviour. Impairments in the amygdala affects emotions and reduces fear, and changes in the paralimbic system and orbifrontal cortex means increases in hostility, and also problems with the temporal cortex can decrease emotional processing and facial recognition. And if we have a decrease in facial recognition and understanding of emotions, we're back into the realms of semantic aphasia and not understanding simple things in life that we all take for granted. All in all, what you have is something quite alien, snake-like, yet not overtly evil, just operating within the paradigm of warped neurological functioning. It's a bit like if your TV had a component faulty or missing. You may not get colour or complete sound, and the TV cannot help that, but it's still a TV, and just parts of its wiring doesn't work, so you will get what you get. A television, but a deficient television. The brain works the same way. You're still a person, it's still a brain, it's just deficient, so it doesn't work like the other ones do. So, the same can be said of the idiopathic psychopath's brain. Anton appears to have no level of excitement, sexual stimulation, libido, variation in emotions, or even social understanding, but that doesn't make him slow, unintelligent, or any less ruthless. All his processing equipment is there, all his reasoning and Machiavellianism is present, and most of all, his focus and seeming immunity to anxiety makes him highly dangerous, lethal, and impossible to reason with. But it also makes him very anhedonic, robotic, and as he travels from person to person and place to place and causes chaos and mayhem, his destiny will always means he succeeds in his goal, because at the end of the day, there is an almost inhuman level of focus. Balancing the characterization of the idiopathic psychopath is a difficult proposition. Jamie Gumb, the psychopathic killer from Silence of the Lambs, is more of a secondary psychopath, or sociopath, as he was abused and raised in a malignantly nurturing environment, and so his temperament, anger, hostility, and anxiety all fluctuate, as would the personality which has been raised in instability and violence. His personality and temperament mirrors what he grew up in, which was instability and violence. Yes, his cruelty and psychopathic symptom list is all in check, but much like when he wants the girl to put the lotion in the flipping basket, his impulsiveness and rage is uncontrolled. Anton is the opposite. He is just wired faulty, and with all the propensities and proclivities and predilections for egoism, Machiavellianism, narcissism, violence, cruelty, and lack of empathy, his idiopathic psychopathy is going to be very different, more controlled, and very paradoxical, and based on a whole other continuum. Perhaps one of the best examples is when he needs to change cars, so he pulls over a driver and puts a bolt through the driver's head. The victim thinks Anton is the police, so goes with social compliance, where Anton himself mimics what passes for a human smile, placates with non-committal words, almost small print in verbal form, and then calmly executes him. No stress, no cares, no raised heartbeats. It's all part of the journey and a task that needs to be done. And that's it for this week's video, so please remember, psychology is cool. Anyway, please like, share and subscribe, or even leave a comment if you want, because they always generate good debate and are always welcome. Or even make a suggestion for a future video or something you want to see covered. And as ever, until next time, I'll catch you later.
Call it friendo.